Sidney Bechet was an American jazz saxophonist, clarinetist, and composer. He was one of the first important soloists in jazz, and was perhaps the first notable jazz saxophonist. Forceful delivery, well-constructed improvisations, and a distinctive, wide vibrato characterized Bechet's playing. Bechet's erratic temperament hampered his career, however, and not until the late 1940s did he earn wide acclaim. Biography. Bechet was born in New Orleans in 1897 to a middle-class Creole of color family. Sidney's older brother Leonard Victor Bechet was a full-time dentist and a part-time trombonist and band leader. Sidney Bechet quickly learned to play several musical instruments kept around the house, mostly by teaching himself. He soon decided to specialize in clarinet. At the age of 6, Sidney started playing along with his brother's band at a family birthday party, debuting his talents to acclaim. Later in his youth, Bechet studied with such renowned Creole clarinetists as Lorenzo Chio, Big Eye Louis Nelson de Lisle, and George Barkett. Soon after, Bechet began to play in many New Orleans ensembles, improvising with what was acceptable for jazz at that time. These ensembles included parade work with Freddie Keppard's celebrated brass band, the Olympia Orchestra, and John Robichaux's Gentile Dance Orchestra. Indiana, 1911-12, Bechet performed with Bunk Johnson in the Eagle Band of New Orleans, and in 1913-14, with King Oliver in the Olympia Band. Although Bechet spent his childhood and adolescence in New Orleans, from 1914 to 1917 he was touring and traveling, going as far north as Chicago, and frequently teaming up with Freddie Keppard, another notable Creole musician. In the spring of 1919, Bechet traveled to New York, where he joined Will Marion Cook's Syncopated Orchestra. Soon after, the orchestra journeyed to Europe where, almost immediately upon arrival, they performed at the Royal Philharmonic Hall in London. The group was warmly received, and Bechet was especially popular, attracting attention near and far. While in London, Bechet discovered the straight soprano saxophone, and quickly developed a style quite unlike his warm, reedy clarinet tone. His saxophone sound could be described as emotional, reckless, and large. He would often use a very broad vibrato, similar to what was common for some New Orleans clarinetists at the time. After being convicted of assaulting a woman, Bechet was imprisoned in London from September 13 to 26, 1922. He was deported back to the United States, leaving Southampton on November 3 and arriving in New York on November 13, 1922. On July 30, 1923, he began recording. It is some of his earliest surviving studio work. The session was led by Clarence Williams, a pianist and songwriter, better known at the time for his music publishing and record producing. Bechet recorded Wildcat Blues, and Kansas City Man Blues. Wildcat Blues is in a multi-thematic ragtime tradition, with 4 themes, at 16 bars each, and Kansas City Man Blues is a genuine 12-bar blues. Bechet interpreted and played each uniquely, and with outstanding creativity and innovation for the time. On September 15, 1925, Bechet and other members of the Revue Now Gris, including Josephine Baker, sailed to Europe, arriving at Cherbourg, France, on September 22. The review opened at the Faux Centre des Champs à Permille Copywriters, Paris, on October 2. Bechet toured Europe with various bands, reaching as far as Russia in mid-1926. In 1928, he led his own small band at the famous Bricktops Club in Montmartre, Paris. Bechet was jailed for 11 months in Paris when a woman passerby was wounded during a shootout. The most common version of the story, as related in Ken Burns's jazz documentary, reports that the initial shootout started when another musician-producer told Bechet that he was playing the wrong chord. Bechet challenged the man to a duel and said Sidney Bechet never plays the wrong chord. Other sources assert that Bechet was essentially ambushed by a rival musician. After his release, Bechet was deported to New York. Having arrived right after the stock market crash of 1929, Bechet joined Noble Sicily Euro unregistered trademark S Orchestra. They returned to Europe to tour in Berlin, Germany and Russia. In 1932, Bechet returned to New York City to lead a band with trumpeter Tommy Ladnier. The band, consisting of 6 members, performed at the Savoy Ballroom. He went on to play with Lorenzo Schio, and also got to know Roy Eldridge, another trumpeter. Over time Bechet had increasing difficulty finding musical gigs. He eventually started a tailor shop with Ladnier. During this time, they were visited by various musicians, and played in the back of their shop. Throughout the 1940s, Bechet played in several bands, but his financial situation did not change until the end of that decade. By the end of the 1940s, Bechet tired of struggling to make music in the United States. His contract with Jazz Limited, a Chicago-based record label, was limiting the events where he could perform, for instance excluding the 1948 Festival of Europe in Nice. He believed that the jazz scene in the U.S. had little left to offer him and that was getting stale. Bechet relocated to France in 1950 after performing as a soloist at the Paris Jazz Fair. His performance at the fair resulted in a surge in his popularity in France. After that, Bechet had little problem finding well-paid work in France. In 1951, Bechet married Elizabeth Ziegler in Antibes, France. In 1953, he signed a recording contract with French Vogue, which lasted for the rest of his life. He recorded many hit tunes, including Les Oinons, Promenade aux Champs-Élysées, and the international hit Petite Fleur. He also composed a classical ballet score in the late Romantic style of Tchaikovsky, called La Nuitiste Sorcière. Existentialists in France called him Le Dieu. Shortly before his death, Bechet dictated his poetic autobiography, Treat It Gentle. Record producer and radio host Al Rose, who had worked with Bechet several times during concert promotions and had a fractious relationship with him, thought Bechet's view of himself in his autobiography was starkly different from the one he knew. The kindly old gentleman in his book was filled with charity and compassion. The one I knew was self-centered, cold, and capable of the most atrocious cruelty, especially toward women. Bechet died in Garches, near Paris, from lung cancer on May 14, 1959, on his 62nd birthday. Career: Bechet successfully composed in jazz, pop tune, and extended concert work forms. He knew how to read music but chose not to, due to his highly developed inner ear. He developed his own fingering system and never played section parts in a big band or swing-style combo. His recordings have often been reissued. Sidney Bechet's primary instruments were the clarinet and the soprano sax. His playing style is intense and passionate, and had a wide vibrato. He was also known to be very proficient with his instruments and a master at improvisation. Bechet liked to have his sound dominate in a performance, and trumpeters found it very difficult to play alongside him. Philip Larkin wrote about his music, "On me your voice falls as they say love should, like an enormous yes. My crescent city, is where your speech alone is understood, and greeted as the natural noise of good, scattering long-haired grief and scored pity." Some of the highlights of his career include 1923 sides with Louis Armstrong in the Clarence Williams Blue Five. The 1932, 1940, 1941 New Orleans Fête Warmer sides. A 1938 Tommy Ladnier Orchestra session. A hit 1939 recording of Summertime. And various versions of his own composition, Petite Fleur. In 1939, Bechet co-led a group with pianist Willie the Lion Smith that recorded several early versions of what was later called Latin jazz, adapting traditional copyright ring, rumba and Haitian songs to the jazz idiom. On July 28, 1940, Sidney Bechet made a guest appearance on NBC Radio's The Chamber Music Society of Lower Basin Street show, playing two of his showpieces with Henry Levine's Dixieland Band. Levine invited Bechet into the RCA Victor recording studio, where Bechet lent his soprano sax to Levine's traditional arrangement of Muskrat Ramble. On April 18, 1941, as an early experiment in overdubbing at Victor, Bechet recorded a version of the pop song The Sheik of Araby, playing 6 different instruments: clarinet, soprano saxophone, tenor saxophone, piano, bass, and drums. A hitherto unissued master of this recording was included in the 1965 LP Bechet of New Orleans, issued by RCA Victor as LPV 510. On the liner notes, George Oifa quotes Bechet as follows. I started by playing the chic on piano, and played the drums while listening to the piano. I meant to play all the rhythm instruments, but got all mixed up and grabbed my soprano, then the bass, then the tenor saxophone, and finally finished up with the clarinet. In 1944, 1946, and 1953 he recorded and performed in concert with the Chicago jazz pianist and vibraphonist Max Miller, private recordings that are part of the Max Miller archive and have never been released. These concerts and recordings are covered completely in John Chilton's authoritative book on Bechet. Bechet was an important influence on the alto saxophonist Johnny Hodges, who studied with him as a teenager. Legacy and honors. In 1919, Ernest Ansermet, a Swiss classical conductor, wrote a tribute to Bechet, one of the earliest to a jazz musician from the classical field of music, linking Bechet's music with that of Bach. In 1968, Bechet was inducted into Downbeat magazine's Jazz Hall of Fame. The New York Times music writer Robert Palmer wrote of Bechet, by combining the cry of the blues players and the finesse of the Creoles into his own way, Sidney Bechet created a style which moved the emotions even as it dazzled the mind. Bechet to me was the very epitome of jazz. Everything he played in his whole life was completely original. I honestly think he was the most unique man to ever be in this music. Duke Ellington. The British poet Philip Larkin wrote an ode to Bechet in The Wits in Weddings. In popular culture Sugar Blue, the renowned blues harmonica player, took his name from the Bechet recording Sugar Blues, saying, I needed a nickname. All the good ones were taken. You know Muddy Waters, Blind Lemon, Sonny Boy. Until one night a friend and I were leaving a concert a Doc Watson concert when somebody threw out of the window a box full of old 78s, I picked one up and it said Sugar Blues by Sidney Bechet. That's it. I thought it was perfect. So here I am. Bechet's song Si tu veux Marie was prominently featured in the Woody Allen film Midnight in Paris. In Disneyland's Tower of Terror ride, Bechet's song, When the Sun Sets Down South is played as cue music. The ride is a deserted, since Halloween of 1939, hotel in the dark side of Hollywood. In the BBC Grantchester, protagonist Sidney Chambers listens to jazz records, and Bechet is one of his favorites. A running joke is that his housekeeper keeps pronouncing the name Beckett rather than Bechet. In music Bob Dora, who played with Bechet, recorded a tribute song, called Something for Sidney, on his Right on My Way Home album. Van Morrison mentions Bechet in his song See Me Through Part 2. The French chanteuse Patricia Cars recorded the song, L'Enterrement de Sidney Bechet, on her 1990 album Ska Ni de Vie. Raquel Bitton pays tribute to Sidney Bechet in her CD Paris Blues, singing Petite Fleur. Radiohead used his single Egyptian Fantasy as the exit song for their 2012 tour. In film TV Bechet appeared in 3 films, playing a jazz musician, Série Noire L'Inspecteur Connaît la Musique and Quelle Copyright Cup. In the 1997 documentary Wild Man Blues, Woody Allen, the director and clarinetist, repeatedly referred to Bechet. He named one of his children adopted with his wife Soon-Yi Previn after Bechet. Bechet is portrayed by Jeffrey Wright in 2 episodes of the television series The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. In the 2001 French feature film Armor copyright lies several original Sidney Bechet recordings can be heard as background music including Summertime. In the 2009 Disney animated feature The Princess and the Frog, Bechet is mentioned by Louis, the trumpet-playing alligator, during the musical number, When We're Human. Bechet's playing can be heard throughout the Woody Allen film Midnight in Paris. In the 1959 film Anatomy of a Murder, James Stewart, the country lawyer defending an army officer accused of murder, and an amateur jazz pianist on the side, refers to Bechet as one of the best. Partial discography. Singles Texas Mona Blues 1924, Cake Walkin' Babies from Home 1925, Blues in Thirds 1940, Dear Old Southland 1940, Egyptian Fantasy -1941, Muskrat Ramble 1944, Blue Horizon 1944, Petite Fleur 1959. Footnotes. References: Treat It Gentle by Sidney Bechet. John Chilton, Sidney Bechet, The Wizard of Jazz. American People's Encyclopedia Yearbook for 1953, pages 542. Article by George Harifer in Metronome Magazine, December 1946. External links: Sidney Bechet on redhotjazz.com, profile with pictures, A. Bechet discography.